Francis, Antonio, Amelia, and Rose were the children of Pasquale and Sabatina Manzo. In 1928, the family of six decided to come to America. At the time, Francis was 21 years old, Antonio was 18, Amelia was 12, and Rose was 8. However, how did this family of six come to be, and how did they get to America? Those are the questions that I asked my grandfather, Antonio. It was 1907, and 7 men were building a wall in the village of Palmero, Italy. One of the masons was my great-grandfather, Pasquale Manzo. Pasquale was a very young, handsome, tall, muscular Italian man. Every day, a beautiful girl named Sabatina Carenti would walk by Pasquale's work site on her way to town. All the masons would whistle and yell her name as she walked by, except Pasquale. Sabatina was from the wealthiest family in the village. The Carentis owned a huge farm, a ranch, and a vineyard. They even owned the general stores around the village. At the end of every day, Pasquale would have to walk by Sabatino's house to get home. One day, Sabatina was sitting on her front porch and called out to Pasquale. She said, "Aren't you the young man working in the village?" Pasquale was in shock she was even talking to him. However, he struck up a conversation and it was love at first sight. They decided that they would meet that night in the vineyard and go on a secret date. Sabatina and Pasquale snuck around for a couple weeks due to Sabatino's fear of her parents not approving of Pasquale since he was not from wealth. However, after those weeks, Pasquale decided to put his foot down. He was in love, and he wanted to meet the love of his life's parents. So after a couple more weeks of Sabatina pleading with Pasquale, she finally agreed. Sabatina introduced Pasquale to her parents, Dominic and Florence, and they were furious. They didn't approve of their daughter dating lower class. Later that night, Sabatina and Pasquale met up in the vineyard and discussed Sabatina's parents' disapproval of her. They decided that the upcoming weekend they were going to run away to Venice and get married. After the long romantic getaway, they dreaded going back to Palmero. When they arrived back at the Carenti household, Dominic came out of the front door with a shotgun, pointing it at Pasquale, yelling, "You're not allowed to step foot on this property ever again." Sabatina screamed and replied, "No, don't shoot him. We're married. He's my husband." Dominic fell to his knees and began to weep. "How could this happen? How could you marry a laborer? You're royalty," he said. Out of anger, Dominic fired the gun and missed Pasquale by inches. Pasquale fell to the ground out of fright. Dominic, thinking that he had killed him, raced to help Pasquale. Florence came running out of the house, yelling, "You shot him, you killed him." Sabatino began to weep. All 3 crowded around Pasquale's body to discover that he was not shot at all, just scared. After that night, Dominic's attitude changed. Pasquale began to grow on Dominic, and Dominic hired Pasquale to work on the ranch while he lived with Sabatina there. However, he still never really liked him. Dominic had a private office within the house of the ranch. One day, as Pasquale entered the house, he peeked into the office out of curiosity. He saw a portrait hanging on the wall of Sabatina and noticed it was crooked. He walked over to straighten it, and as he touched the frame, the portrait fell. There was a large hole cut out of the wall. He reached in and pulled out a large golden chest. He was unsure whether or not he should open it. However, he had to see what was inside. He slowly raised the lid and his eyes lit up as he saw diamonds, pearls, rubies, emeralds, and sapphires. He knew this was worth a fortune and put the chest back and fixed the portrait right away. He never talked about or looked at the chest ever again until 1928. After years later, Pasquale and Sabatina were living in the year 1928 with their 4 children, Francis, Antonio, Amelia, and Rose. Pasquale was now 41 years old and had been working on the ranch for over 20 years. Pasquale had grown tired of Dominic not actually ever liking him. Dominic didn't really like his grandchildren either. He would commonly say, "I don't consider the Manzo children my true family because they have a laborer's blood." One Sunday, while the family was eating dinner, Pasquale suggested to the family that they should start a new life and move to America. He told Sabatina about how horribly her father treats him and their children and said how much of a better life they would have in America. Sabatina and the children were very interested and agreed to go to America. They set up a date and brought tickets for the boat to the U.S. Pasquale had an idea. He would go back to the golden chest and take the treasure with them to America. When they arrived at the port, they said their goodbyes to the Carentis as well as their friends. When boarding the ship, Pasquale provided a sponsor in America, his cousin Vincenzo Manzo of 110 Dorrance Street, Providence, Rhode Island. They soon sailed off, and after what seemed like forever of sailing, they passed the Statue of Liberty and entered Ellis Island. From there, they took the train to Providence and met Vincenzo at the station. Pasquale got work through Vincenzo and worked at the railroad. Sabatina worked at a nearby bakery. Francis, Antonio, and Emila worked making deliveries for local markets, and Rose was too young to work. The family needed all the income they could earn in order to survive in America. They didn't have much money, but they were very happy. One night, Vincenzo sat everyone down and said he was going to return to Italy because his mother had passed away and he had to take care of family business. He sold the house to Pasquale and Sabatina. Pasquale decided that he was going to remodel the downstairs bathroom, but before closing the wall next to the shower, he called his son Francis to help. He showed Francis the Corinthi chest. Before they hid it in the wall, Francis asked, "Does this mean we're rich?" His father replied and said, "No, but one day you will be." Pasquale told Francis that one day when he was older and needed the money for something important, he would give it to him. Years later, in 1949, Francis came to his father and told him that he wanted to open a restaurant with his brother Antonio. They showed him all their business plans, including restaurant location, layout, and menu. The only thing they had missing was the financing. He told his father that this is the important thing he needed to use the golden chest for. After a long decision process, Pasquale agreed. He gave them the chest to sell, and they got the money to open the restaurant. A year later, in 1950, they opened the Magic Chef in North Providence, Rhode Island. This restaurant was a huge hit and was famous in Rhode Island. Pasquale was happy he made the decision to give the chest to his sons. Sabatina never found out about the chest.